Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to my stream. We're going to be working on our Wordle clone called Vuedle. So if you weren't able to make it for the last stream, it is available on YouTube here, so you can take a look at that if you want to catch up. However, this is where we're at. We've got our main UI components mostly complete here. And what we're going to do with this next bit is to get that interactivity in. So if we look at this top part here, we've got the main game board where we've got the words. We can put in guesses. It'll highlight the colors correctly. We worked through a bug that a viewer pointed out last time. So it should be correct. So here we're passing in these guesses, while trust, truth, vuex, then exclamation mark, and then vue.js. And if we pass in the answer, correct answer as being truth, then we see that it will highlight this one entirely in green, which is correct. These three letters here are in the correct location for trust, and then the last T is in the correct location, but not in the correct, or it is in the letter, but it is in the word, but not in the correct location. Actually, I'm not sure if, now that I think about it, I think we might have a bug here because multiple letters are going to cause this. I don't know what Wordle does to actually handle this, or if they just ignore this as an edge case. For now, we will leave that and we'll move on. We've got the keyboard, also does the same thing. It'll highlight the letters that you've used. It'll put them in a dark background. We can no longer use them. And these letters here in green. If we take out the truth guess, we should see that some of these are highlighted in yellow because they are in the correct location, but not, or they are in the word, but not in the correct location. So that is what we've got. So the next step is to do a few updates in terms of interactivity. We don't have any interactivity. If we go to our Wordle game, and we can see that they have this grid here. We've got 6 guesses, and when we first start out, it's blank, so that we can enter in our guesses. And we can either click on this here, or we can actually use the keyboard, which is nice. So we need to implement that part. We don't have a way of doing input, and our component here only renders out the guesses that we've already done. We don't have any way of viewing or inputting new guesses. Once we get that, then we can move all this stuff, make sure that it's all the logic and everything is on the server using the server components, and then we can do like the full scope of the game where we start a new game, play through, we only get a certain number of guesses, and then at the end we get our score, whether we did it in 3 guesses or didn't make it at all. So last time we had a bug in the keyboard that I want to fix. So when we click on one of these things in the keyboard here, right, we have these components as server components, so we don't have interactivity here with those. So for now, we will make these client side just for development purposes. And yeah, the dev server's not going to like that. So we're going to restart. See while that's happening. Okay, so when we click on these things, what we're getting is in the app.view, I have set up that our click handler here is just logging out the key that gets passed. However, we get this key, but we also get the actual pointer event, but I'm not passing in the pointer event anywhere. So that's a little confusing to me, especially because I'm only taking in this one argument here. And in the keyboard, I'm only emitting the letter. Hey, Alex, thanks for joining. I normally get to hang out with Alex at this time of day, but he is busy doing some Nuxt things. So no recording of a podcast this week. So get to do a live stream with all y'all, which currently is just Alex, but you know, we got some replay value here as well. So it was mentioned in the last stream that I forgot to do defineEmits, and I suspect that that's what's going on here. And sure enough, as if we actually define our emits correctly, then we get just the letter. Although it makes me curious to know how this click handler actually works if we don't have the defineEmits and how that event is getting propagated up. I think what's happening is I'm just going to test this because this is what I do. If I remove this line and I still have that event handler up, then I would expect that I might get that pointer event. Ah, there we go. So what is happening is that without defineEmits, we're actually, yeah, so it does work without defineEmits, technically. But what we're actually doing is we're binding twice to that event, or that this button click event is getting emitted twice. So we get it emitted twice from the view side of things, and that's why we get the letter. So I'll refresh this again. So this first letter comes from this actual emit here, but then because we don't have defineEmits set up, it does some weird stuff and actually emits the event, just a regular browser, like a native browser event here. And this click handler will respond. It doesn't care about where these events come from. It just is listening for any sort of click event. And then, yeah, that's why we get these two events here. Okay. That was confusing me last stream. Glad that we got that sorted out. And, you know, learned some new things about how Vue works. There must be some sort of logic that defineEmits does to suppress these native browser events. But then if we take out this .prevent modifier, oh, I guess that doesn't do anything. Right. Yeah, that wouldn't do anything. I think I just threw that on there as like a Hail Mary because I didn't know what's going on. All right. So YouTube is telling me my stream is buffering weirdly. So hopefully that's not a bad experience for you all. I'm just going to keep going. And hopefully things will fix themselves, because there's not really a whole lot that I can do at this point. So now we need to figure out our input. Do we want to figure out input, or we need to update our word grid first, actually? So we've got our guesses. We're iterating through those, but we actually want to create this full grid here. So to do that, we're going to set up another iteration of our v4. Actually, I don't need this v4 on the template. No, actually I do. Never mind. Because we're iterating twice in here. Okay. So we're going to put our guesses in, and then we're going to iterate I in 5 minus guess what colors length. You know, this looks more or less correct. We want the number, so we're actually going to do another v4 here. And we're going to put a border. All right, something is not working the way that I want. Oh, I'm doing a div. I don't want this to be a div. That is a template. Okay. So here we go. We've got our extra row of things there, but I think we want 6 guesses in total. Okay. So I'm just going to comment these guesses and then empty rows. So it's still telling me that YouTube's not receiving enough video. It looks like I'm streaming at a good rate though, so I'm not sure what's going on, why YouTube is giving me this error. But you know, I'm pretty good at ignoring warnings while I'm developing code, so I guess we'll just we'll just keep going. Okay, so this code here, because it's a grid and I've set it up to be a grid with 5 columns, I don't need to actually render the rows in their own divs. I'm just rendering a whole long list of squares. So I'm rendering out 30 squares here, and we just need to know which how many of those 30 squares are going to be these blank ones at the end, or how many of them are going to be the guesses here. And so this is what this lets us do. So we're going to have 6 guesses. This is an interesting thing that Vue does, where we can actually iterate in over a v4 with a range. We don't actually need an array of items. We can do I in 6 or any other number. And here we're defining this number as 6 minus the number of guesses that we have. And then we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to do j in 5. We just want each row to have 5 letters, 5 squares. I'm going to check to see. I think that I want the border to be a little thicker. Yeah. So we'll do it that way. Border 2. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. So now we should see that if I remove guesses here, then we should still maintain the 6 here, but it will, yeah, there we go. Perfect. So we have 6 there, and depending on how many guesses we've got, it will render that out correctly. So now we've got our grid displaying those blank empty squares. Oh, hey, Eduardo's also here. Thanks for joining. Glad that my stream is not buffering or lagging. I don't know what this weird error is about. So continuing on. Okay. So now we have to solve the input problem. And the way that I want to do this is unknown to me at this point in time. So let's figure this out. So we've got our click handler here, and it works correctly now. We've got our key and the letter that we want. So we probably want to set up a ref with the current guess that we can click around and do that. We could eventually make it so that we re-render this whole thing on every single click. But that seems, if we're playing around with server components, that might be a fun little exercise. I guess the whole point of this is not necessarily to make it as optimized as possible. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. For now, we can do current guess. And we will hook it up here to that when we click, we will do that. I'm assuming that this is going to be correct, but let's read through this first. Okay, so if we've got this emoji that we have for the backspace, then we will remove off end, and that's good. We do enter, then we'll push it to the guesses. Then if our current guess is otherwise, then we just add it to that. Okay. So we don't have any way of rendering out the current guess. So we need to add that to our word grid here. And yeah, okay. So current guess. I spell that correctly. Have a nice string there. And oh, I did this in the wrong file. Let me close that so that I don't start typing the wrong file and wondering why things aren't working correctly. Because that seems to happen all too often with me. Okay, so now we actually need a third case here. We've got our guesses, we've got our empty rows. We need this. We can do like a third case where we've got the input row, or we could update this case here with the empty rows to only render out the next guess based on what we've got. I feel like that's probably easiest to do it this way instead of trying to put in some logic there. See what... Nah, this is not correct. So we're going to do if p.props current guess. We'll actually do... We'll say the current guess is going to take up an entire row. And we will always have this here. And we'll do I'm going to take this guy because we want the same styling, but we actually want character in props.currentGuess because we want to iterate through all of the characters in currentGuess. I don't know if we need to split it because I think this will just, because the string has like this iterator on it. So if you do array things with a string, it'll automatically give you all of the characters back. But I could be wrong. Okay, it looks like we're rendering correctly. Now if I do this, it's adding stuff to the row. Okay. But it's not rendering. Okay. Maybe I do need to do. Text white. That's probably the issue there. Okay. Sweet. I do backspace. Then I need to do also v4 to render out the rest of the row so that this row will have the empty. Yeah, there we go. We'll have all of the empty spaces there. Okay, so now we've got our current guess. It'll render out all of the characters that we've got in our guess, one tile for each, then tiles remaining to fill out the rest of the UI. So if we type in TRUTH, it'll put it in there. We hit enter. That something went wrong. We tried to push to the end. Oh, this is not our reactive value. So we should make that reactive. Ref.guesses current guesses dot value dot push. Okay. So if we do truth, there we go. Okay. Then yeah. Okay. So now we've got our input working. Great. We can type in, well, I guess at this point we don't have keyboard support, but we've got our ability to click, and we can, get our input going. Talking about bouldering. I've never actually gone bouldering. I think the most rock climbing I've done was when I was a child and I was just afraid of heights and afraid of falling. And so then it wasn't great. It was not a great experience, but I'd try again. Definitely would. I have some like problems with my wrists and my forearms don't do so great. So like the last time I went bowling was a bad experience because it just, my body does not like that. So I'm not sure how well I would be able to handle it, but yeah, definitely a fun thing. I'm sure even just like the socializing aspect of it and being outside and that's always fun. So even if I'm just hanging out and taking pictures of people or something. Yeah. I'm big, it's less intimidating. I mean, yeah, I still have a problem with heights. So I live just like an hour away from Toronto and the CN Tower. And you know what? I've never been to the top of the CN Tower because why would I want to do that if I'm not good with heights, you know? Okay, let's get back to our app. So we managed to get in our input here. And There's something going on. I managed to break it. I'm not sure if that's like a hot module, like a reloading thing. Sometimes there's like inconsistencies that happen. Okay, when we get to the end, the word grid doesn't like when we've got our actual, we have 6 guesses for some reason. So we've got to figure that out. Probably just one of those horrible off by 1 errors. Yeah, okay. Invalid array length. Range error, invalid array length. I'm not sure I've ever encountered that error, that specific one before. Okay, we're dealing with an array length. Oh, okay, so that's because 5 minus 6 is -1, and we cannot create an array with -1 length. That seems to be pretty obvious to me. So I think we can stick a VIF on here, even though we're not. VIF is less than. That should work. And this is technically bad practice, but yeah, because each iteration, yeah. In the Vue docs, there's a section on combining VIFs and V4s on the same element. And generally it's a bad idea. I mean, I could just pull this off into its own template here. That's another thing I should mention, which this whole use of, that's not what I wanted. This whole use of templates here is sometimes you want to do things like with attributes or with like these directives like VF and V4 and all that sort of stuff, but you don't actually want to render out any extra elements. And so you can use this template to add in extra logic and to nest things and to organize stuff. You can even just like, if you want to group things better. So it's great for, like here we've got a VIF, so we can just wrap that in there. And then twice now we've done this template with the V4 on it because we want to have nested V4s, but we don't want our divs to be nested. And so then we can achieve that with this template tag. So you get a little, like some directives for free, basically. In a way, these are sort of like the original, the OG renderless components. Okay. Now we're rendering an extra layer here that we don't want. This is the input one, I believe. We only want to render this if we have, if our guesses are not done. If we have all the guesses, we're gonna have the same. Oh, what's going on with my editor? We have the same condition here as with the empty rows. If we've made all of the guesses, then we don't want to render any empty rows and we don't want to render any input rows. Sweet, there we go. So, okay, now we have this working as we would want. I can, something, I'm not limiting the length of the guess here. That's what's going on. Perfect. So if I try and go over the limit, then we do not go over the limit, and that is perfect. Okay, so now we have got all of our inputs ready to go, and it will tell us if we, like how we're doing. We can get guesses in, and so that's almost the entire game. We don't have like a start a new game. We don't have a way of getting an actual word in. We don't have a way of then ending the game. So we need that state. And then we also need to make sure that we're doing this in a way that will work with server-side rendering, or with specifically server-rendered components only. So let me see what I want to do here. Why don't we do... I'm going to first get this to work server-side only, and then we can add in some logic to get the answer based on the day. Then we can do the actual like game state. Or maybe we'll do the word list at the end, because that's less interesting. So the word grid, I believe, if I type server correctly, should work. Because we're just updating props. And so if we update the props, it'll trigger a request right now to re-render this on the server with every keystroke. So because that's when the props change, right? So if I clear this out, if I hit backspace, why is it not showing in my network tab? Oh, because it was cached. Oh. See, learn new things every day. That makes perfect sense. Okay. So if we type in, ooh, that's not what I wanted to do. Drag these guys back out. Okay. If I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see what's going on here. All right, so Nuxt Server Components. What happens with Nuxt Server Components is that I can specify here on the side here, when I change the file name to .server, it'll only render on the server instead of like a normal Nuxt component will render on the server, and then once the client hydrates and everything, it'll then start to render client side. Then what we want to do is whenever our props change, it will actually make a special fetch request to the Nuxt server, and passing in is actually a JSON that it gets back. Oh, like this. Hey, I don't know how I get rid of this window. Anyways, so we make a query string that's just the props. So this is the request that we make. We make it to this Nuxt Island endpoint with this word grid component and then a hash to preserve uniqueness. And I think this might be like a scope ID, something like that. It doesn't really matter. Then we pass in the props, and we can see them nicely parsed out here. These are all the props that we're passing in. So we're just going to make this request to the server, and then the response is, okay, so the ID of that component, and then we're going to have some stuff here about like the different, I guess this is, it passes back what style sheet it needs. Very interesting. I guess that makes sense. Because each component will have different CSS and different, like especially with Tailwind, if you use that, it will look at the CSS that you actually used in your component and only ship that CSS. So in theory, if you have a server rendered component, then if you render it in a different way, you might need new CSS that you didn't have before. That's what I'm assuming that this is for. So don't take my word for that because I don't know for sure. I have to look into that a bit more. Then we've got this HTML property at the end, and this is the stuff that's going to get rendered to our page. So every single time we hit a new key, we have a new set of props that's passed. But because we have these requests cached in the browser, then if I hit the backspace, we don't have to have new requests going out because we've already got that data. I did not realize that before we started this stream, but of course that would make sense because that's how browsers and requests typically work. Okay, so I thought that would be more difficult to get to work, that it would update on every letter that we input, but actually it's not that hard. So now our word grid is completely server rendered. Now we want to get our keyboard to be server rendered. That is a bit more tricky because we are emitting things from it. And so we need to make it interactive. So I'm not sure that we actually can make it server rendered because then it wouldn't be, we can't have it be static HTML. I thought that we maybe could. Trying to think this through to see if there is in fact a way that we could make this happen. But the keyboard, I mean, it's a small component. It's not like we're shipping tons of JavaScript to the front end here. I mean, this whole app is very small. Give me a moment to think about this. If we can't do it, then we'll just soldier on with it being non-interactive, and we'll make the rest of the game statically rendered. You know, I don't think that there is a way. And you know what? I'm not going to let that bother me. Well, maybe I have to circle back to this in the future. I don't think it's possible though, because the whole point with server rendered components is that there is no activity. We've got these lakes of staticness within our interactive app. I really think that this should be called the lakes pattern and not the island pattern, because it's the inverse of the islands pattern. Anyway, let's continue on and actually finish this guy up. So we can make this, I'm going to pull this into a game component. I'm actually going to take most of this because I want to make that game component that server rendered. Actually, yeah, reverse island. The lakes, yeah, because islands of the islands architecture is islands of interactivity in a sea of static rendered app. That's the word. And here with Nuxt, we're doing the opposite or the reverse, or however you want to think about it. By default, everything is interactive, and then we insert bits of staticness onto our app. Okay. I lost my train of thought here. Thinking about lakes and islands. Making a game component. Well, okay. Actually, I might do a page here because I want to show you something interesting as well that we can do with server components. So here we're going to add in pages. We're going to call this index, but we're actually going to give it this server suffix here. So what that will do is it will wrap this entire page component in a Nuxt Island component. And that Nuxt Island component is what's used under the hood to make these server components work. So we've got our Nuxt Island component, and this makes this server page here work similarly to this server component here, except we get the file-based routing and the other stuff that comes with Nuxt pages. We'll have to do something with this because this interactivity will not work. We'll have to get rid of this because we now need to render a Nuxt page component so that we actually can get that view router in there and everything working. So the initial page render works because we're on the server and all that's great, but we don't get any reactivity because we don't have any JavaScript on the front end here. But these are still buttons, so they look like they can be clicked, which is how it is. Okay, so we've got a static page. We need to get all of this stuff here into a component that lets us do dynamic things. The issue is that we can put interactive components inside of server components, but we can only do that one level deep. If we try and go further than that, it doesn't seem to work based on my experimentation. So this is where things get a little tricky because we're bumping up against the limitations of server components. And what we need to do is take this stuff. We need to keep track of the app state. and figure out a way of basically this game component here. Yeah, we still need to create a game component that then is interactive, because we need to keep track of this state, this input state. Okay. So we can have this index page here. Okay. That makes sense. Call it game. And then this one will keep track of the game state as well. Copying and pasting code around. I don't know why this is getting angry at me. Setup function clicked. Oh, that's why. Okay. Wildly copying and pasting things around everywhere. And get rid of this. Do game. Change that to a template. And we need the div there. Okay, so our game component has the word grid and the keyboard. The word grid is server rendered. The page is server rendered. This game component is not server rendered. However, it is not interactive because it's inside of a statically rendered server page. But if we add this Nuxt client attribute here, that should be enough to get us to do this properly, unless I need to add, there's a config option that I forget off the top of my head. Server, nope, that's wrong. Components, server components. Okay, so there's some config values that we need to do, namely experimental.componentIsland.selectiveClient, and then set it to deep. Experimental component island, and set that to deep. Island is not plural. And that should be what we need. Oh, okay. So this is not working the way that we want it. Okay. We have our game component. Keyboard component. Oh. I wonder if this, the thing I said about nesting before, where it will, what is it doing? Oh, it's randomly going to put in keys. Okay. Sure. I think that's what's going on there. I'm just checking to see, does it actually bootstrap into reactivity on the front end here? And it seems like this game component is not doing that. So we'll change it to a regular page for now. And just so we can debug things. We don't need to do that. We'll do current guess.value. Okay, so we're able to bootstrap the reactivity here on or hydrate or partially hydrate or whatever technical term you like. So it works when the page is a regular page. If we do server, we're going to have to restart our dev server because we've changed the name of the file. Then we see that it is not, in fact, this game component here is not, in fact, partially interactive. Oh, I missed this. Oh, okay, selective client. Oh, is it component island or component islands? Oh, it is component islands. Okay, so a little typo in the docs here. Is that all we need? Or do we also need to enable it with selective? Thought there was a, okay. Selective client? True. Component islands.selective client and component islands.selective client. Oh, is deep. Okay, so I just had this whole config thing just completely wrong. Experimental component islands selective client deep. Okay. Wow. I mean, if you get your config wrong, then of course it's not going to work, right? Okay, so there we go. It is working. Perfect. Now we can remove this janky thing that we put in for debugging. And wonder why this keyboard gets rendered twice. Okay, so now we've got the page itself is server rendered. The word grid is also server rendered only. The keyboard, however, and the actual game state is client side. So we can keep that in the client. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. So we removed all of the state out of here. We removed the state out of there. We only have state in this one. Okay. Our next step is to set up basically like the beginning and the ending of the game. So basically, how do we do this? What does Wordle do? Does it, I mean, we can decide how we want to do this on our own. Does it resets every time you come in? However, that's not really going to work as well for us. Well, I mean, we could probably do that. It would be nice if we could keep all of the game state just in like a query, in the query params, so that when you refresh, it has that state. You could also do it in local storage. That's another way of doing it. But this game actually has very limited amount of state. It is basically just the number of guesses that you've made. The answer will eventually be based on the current date. So that's not even really game state because it's going to be the same regardless of what, regardless of the client, regardless of the person playing the game, the answer will always be the same. Okay, so how do I want to do the game state? So we can start with an empty array. And it renders this keyboard twice. Is this because it's got hydration errors? Now, why would it have hydration errors? Is this the word grid that's giving me hydration errors? Seems to be the case. So I wonder, yeah, I honestly don't know what the best approach is for debugging these hydration errors. So basically, we go from what a hydration error is. It's that what gets rendered on the server is different than what is getting rendered or hydrated in the client. That's my understanding. And so it seems strange to me that a server rendered component would have a hydration error because it's not really being hydrated, right? So I don't know what that's about. Yeah, okay. So hydration completed but contains mismatches. If anyone knows how to better debug hydration errors, then please let me know because that would be really helpful. I don't know how to do this. Is there a way to do it then other than just like trial and error? Are the props, it might be that the props are different. I mean, no, it doesn't make sense that it could be that if the props are different as soon as it gets hydrated, then like in the game app, the game component here, then it gets rendered one way on the server and then immediately on the client, it's wanting to re-render it differently. That seems like a possible avenue. But I don't know, like these are just refs that aren't being modified until we click on these buttons. So the actual game state should be the same regardless. Strange to me. And it just, yeah. Why does it render the keyboard twice? There's something going on here. What if I looked at my state? Payload. Didn't really be much of a payload. So this is the payload for the word grade component that's statically rendered. Then we've got the page that's statically rendered. I mean, I guess I could look through that to see what's going on here, but you know, I don't know if that makes any sense. This text. Then we've got the Nuxt component, and then we've got the game. Truth, ref. I mean, it's exactly what it should be. Interesting. Like, I don't know. We don't have anything in other than that going on. Hooks, virtual files. No. Okay. Close this guy. All right. We'll just keep going because I don't know what's happening here. And yeah, I've only got like 10, 20 minutes left to get this game state finished. So where are we at again? We have got the game almost working. We need to have something that happens when we hit the end of the guesses. We've made the 6th guess, and what happens is then you either win or you lost, or you get like a score based on how many you did. So the clicked function here, I'm gonna pass. We can basically trigger from here to see if you won the game. We could have it be like a imperative style way of triggering that, where on the click, then we check, okay, did you win or not? Did you hit that win condition? We could also just have it be a separate component that takes in the guesses and the answer, and then based on what's passed in, it can tell you if you've won the game or not. I kind of like that approach to it. We could add it into this word grid. We could also just have like another component in here, like yeah, win lose. Good enough name for that. And then if I make a component here, let's call it win lose.server.view. And we can check to see if the most recent guess is equal to the answer, then you've won. So that's pretty easy to figure out. I don't know where this was going here. I mean, we know what the guesses were because you see them. Okay. Sometimes Copilot gives you really good suggestions. Other times it gives you really weird suggestions. Sometimes I just tab complete and hope for the best. And it likes to do this const props thing, even though with define props, if we're just using props in the template, we actually don't need to define this variable. It'll just be available here for us. I'll do win lose and then restart the server. So we pick up everything fine. And if I do, I think I have to click on the bottom one because the top one is not the actual component. And this had an error. Okay, so we had an error rendering this component win lose.server. Something is going wrong. No match found for location. We lose. Why would it do that? Unexpected token in winlose.server. Div template span. Guesses. Oh, because I'm using TypeScript and I did not set this to be TypeScript. That is what is going on. For some reason, I forget that that happens. So Evan talked about on the podcast that's coming out next week, talked about a future version of Vue potentially having script set up default to lang equals TypeScript, which would be nice. And even for people who don't use TypeScript, you can write JavaScript that is fully valid TypeScript, because TypeScript is only adding features to regular JavaScript. It's a superset of all of the features in JavaScript. So if script setup defaults to TypeScript instead, then you can still write regular JavaScript, but you can also write TypeScript. Okay, so now this is working, but what we actually want is not check the length of the answers. So this is wrong. I should just rate this myself, actually. Okay. That, Copilot failed me. What we're going to do is if guesses at -1 is equal to the answer. The else if, because you didn't lose until guesses.length equal to 6, and you did not guess the correct answer. You win. Okay, great. That's awesome. If we do this and we put in a bunch of random guesses that are incorrect, then we should see a you lose thing. Okay, sweet. So we have the basic state that is basically derived from our state. So this is one of the things that I try to do with Vue components is, instead of making imperative things where we're calling functions all the time, try and make everything as much as possible derived from your state. So our game state here is we have these 3 variables. We've got the current guess, we've got the number of guesses, and we have the correct answer. From these 3 things, everything in our game should be possible. Like everything that we want to render is rendered based off of these 3 variables. You don't need to call a specific function that's like check for win condition, and then it evaluates and then maybe sets another ref that then will toggle this component on or off. We don't need to do that. We can derive everything from this state. And so if we do that, it's simpler, and the reactivity works better for us, right? So the more that we can opt into reactivity versus writing imperative code, the better for us. And what's more interesting is that with this, on the client, we have this current guess, but this variable doesn't actually exist really on the server side. And this answer exists on the server side, but eventually we will base this just off of the current date. So really, we're just like taking the current guess on the client side and the number of guesses or these guesses on the server side, and that's everything we need to know about the game. Until, of course, we want to add in like a leaderboard or sign in to save your score or all other things like that. But we're not really working on that. Okay, so this component looks ugly, and we're going to make it look less ugly. So we're going to restyle this just a little bit. We're going to do font bold. We're going to do yeah, okay. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to have that. I'm just checking the styling based on you know, what it actually looks like. So I have to make it a little bit smaller so I can see what's going on. 4XL seems a little big. I feel like, yeah, that's much better. So we'll keep it there. Actually, I don't want text center. What I want is for this whole div to be centered. Of course, this is not flex. Okay, that's not what I wanted it to do. So by making this a flex, then this word grid gets messed up. MX auto. Just do flex. Actually, this, okay, so this win-lose should probably be, have a VF on it because we don't want to render it if we don't need to. So what I'm going to do is take this. We'll make this without a container on it. And then we'll put these classes on the actual different conditions. And we'll just, you know, have this code duplicated. Now it's going to be okay. And then I'm going to figure out what is going on with this flex stuff and this word grid. So if I do that, we're going to make sure we have some space in there. Then it is not big enough. So we want to make our squares bigger. So we got to set a min size. What are the different min widths? Interesting that min width is based on these letter values or number values, but max width is based on breakpoint sizes. Okay, I think that's basically what we had before, which is what we need. And then the win-lose, we actually don't need this padding, I don't think, because we've got the space. There we go. Okay, so we have a win case, we have a lose case. Now we want to actually put in the ability to have like some sort of points system. In the last few minutes here of the stream, we can put in basically, how do we want to do this? So the points you get is based on how many guesses you've done. When you win, the answer is clearly this answer, you've gotten it correct. If you lose, you'd like to know the answer. So we can say, you win, say points. That, but we want to make it not that big. We can make this one text center. Center. Boom. You win. You scored points. So often I will do like with GitHub Copilot. So if you've ever used ChatGPT, which I'm sure you have, or any other LLM, you know that it's really all about the prompting and how you craft a prompt and the context you give the LLM makes a huge difference in how well it can help you and like what kind of response you get back. With GitHub Copilot, they're always working on improving the context. There's this new chat thing where you can do, you can actually add in a specific file as context. So you can give it this game.view file and then ask it a question. But when you're doing inline coding, you can also use comments. You can say, give the answer. And then now it's going to say, oh, the answer was this. If I didn't, yeah, it was going to do that already, but now we have that set up. Yeah. So you can also do this with JavaScript. You can set up a comment and you can like type out basically like you would prompt ChatGPT and say, this is going to be a function that takes in this value and returns this value. And like, or I could just do this. This function takes the guesses and answer, and I don't know what would be interesting to actually calculate. Returns the number of points player scored. So then you do that, and then it says function get score, and boom, then it does it for you, and it knows that you're in TypeScript and has all the types and everything. So sometimes you can just get away with this by, if you just gave it this function signature. Sometimes I like to do that too, where I say, okay, I know what this function is going to be called, and I can give it a descriptive name, and I can give it the arguments I want passed in, and also give it the type signature here. That's one of the nice things about TypeScript, is that it's much more informationally dense with these types. And so it really helps these LLMs understand what you're trying to do and understand the code by having these types in. And so then by passing in just this function signature, you can often get a really good autocomplete here that takes into account the context of your actual application here. Okay, so that was a little bit of a tangent. If we do this, so we should also disable inputs at some point. You lose. Okay. Okay, so under what conditions do we disable the input? When the last guess is the correct guess, and when you've hit 6 guesses. So we can set up a computed, we're going to call it can guess. That's pretty close. Okay, there we go. We can guess if the guesses.value is less than 6, and the guesses, the last guess is the answer. Okay, we got to put dot value in there. Answer is not a ref because we don't need it interactive because it's static. And then actually this value can go into, where do we want this? We want this to go in the keyboard component. We'll pop it up here. And yes. And then we'll do why would it want to disable the enter key? It was weird. Right, so the disabled attribute, I don't think, does it actually prevent clicks? Because sometimes I thought I had a case one time where it did, and then there was something weird going on there. Okay, something is going on here. Guesses, dot value, okay. Props, dots. Oh, of course. Then this is not, these are not values because props are not refs. Oh, and props on it. There we go. Okay, so if we do wrong answer, and then we give it a correct answer, then you win. You scored 4 points, and we can no longer guess. The game is over, and congratulations, we have won the game, and there we are. So now we have our game, and it works. It is not mobile friendly. It is not responsive. There are a bunch of rough edges. However, the main thing, the main aspect of the game works correctly, and it works great. I'm going to quickly make this a little nicer. How do we want to do this? Font, bold, text, 3XL, but because it's server rendered page, we have to actually hard refresh the page in order to see that. Maybe we'll want a little bit more padding. Or we'll do like a bit of margin on the bottom. Okay, if I do this, now we've got fun little game here. Not a thing. Okay. Or we're going to change the color just because we can. We're going to give it, what color should we give it? I think green. Text green 500 or 600. 500 seems closer to our view colors. Okay, so now we can do trust. Oh, good guess. Almost got it. Boom. I won the game. And with that, we will conclude our stream. We've got these two components that are server rendered. We have our word grid is entirely server rendered. Every time we enter in a new key, it gets re-rendered with that new data. Every time we update this win-lose component will get re-rendered. Most of the time, it will just return nothing. So that is potentially an interesting optimization that we could look into in another stream, is that if we keep sending props, I go over to, where's the network tab? I'll refresh this guy. Close this. So if we keep adding props, it should, if I look at the game here, oh, win-lose isn't, why is win-lose not being done here? That's interesting. Oh, because we don't have current guess. So every guess, right. So if I do truth and I hit enter, then we get back win-lose. But every single time it's going to be empty. That's potential optimization we could do where, well, most of the time the props change, we actually have a VF on it. So we actually never really render this guy. There are only two very specific conditions under which we actually render this win-lose server component. So potentially we would want to move that check out of the server rendered part and into the client rendered part so that we don't have to keep checking all the time because we know we're not going to render that component. So that's an interesting optimization that we can do. The other one is that we can do with these prefetch, preload components methods that Nuxt has. They're a little bit more obscure, I think, but we can, once you make your first guess or once the component or the game loads, we could potentially load this. No, that doesn't actually make any sense. This is a server component. I don't think those components, that applies to lazy components, not server components. Sorry, I'm confusing myself. Scratch that. Why don't we just leave it here before I say any more weird, confusing things? In the next stream, maybe we can add some other fun stuff onto this. We didn't add the ability to change the game answer, and so that's something we'll need to tackle. Then maybe we'll want to add some like leaderboard. We'll want to deploy this app. We want to, have it playable by everyone. So we'll see what we end up doing. I'm having fun. I hope you're having fun, and we'll see what kind of things we can do with this. See you next time.